What are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz is us. Us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it, the fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Welcome to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and the owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you are tuned in here today once again with Closing the Gap, the podcast. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on anywhere that you do your streaming, whether that's Spotify or Apple Music, anywhere that you get podcasts. Look us up, follow us, like us, share, subscribe to Closing the Gap Podcast, where we strive to give you the truth about black wealth. How you doing today, Wilbur?
I am blessed and highly favored.
Yes, indeed. And you are gathered today for another righteous and holy episode of Closing the Gap Podcast. And our title for today's show will be Great Expectations. Great Expectations, where we're striving to talk about how you can avoid the trends and the triggers that happen in life so that you can continue to align your financial goals with the truth of God's wisdom in the midst of a distracted world, right? We got a lot of stuff going on every single day in the news cycle and then also in our personal lives. And so what we want to do today is try to help you keep your expectations set in a realistic manner, right? Oftentimes, Wilbur, I know for myself, I've done it and I still do it. I have to catch myself in doing this, is that I will want some things that I don't necessarily need, and I will set my expectations a little too high, right? But I do need high expectations, but usually the expectations I'm talking about that I set too high are the ones that are unrealistic, right? So we do want everybody to have great expectations for themselves because we serve a great God. Yep. We serve a very big God that continues to bless us and provide for us, but we want you to set those expectations to be realistic.
Yeah. I think, I think the expectations only are unrealistic when we're not willing to make the sacrifices and put in the work necessary to achieve them. So I'm one of the people that, my mom always told me, shoot for the stars, you land on the moon. So I dream big, and I definitely know I probably have, some people probably tell me I have some unrealistic expectations, but, I look at it, I serve a God who made the earth in less than 7 days, when in 6 days it rested on the seventh. So, him doing what I would like to see done, it really ain't that tall of a feat in my eyes. So, but I got to be willing to put in the work to help trigger those great expectations. I think that's where, we tend to, fall short. It's like when I'm talking to my son, I'm asking him, what are your expectations for this upcoming football season? What do you want to accomplish this year going into the football season? So we got to set some goals and some objectives. And when he tells me his expectations, well, I'm looking at the work that he's putting in to accomplish and actually achieve those expectations. So I got to make sure that, well, if you want to accomplish this, that means you got to do that. Are you willing to do that? And most of us, I don't think, have actually engaged in the necessary planning and preparation to know what it will take to actually accomplish and actually see those expectations through. I truly believe that if God is giving the vision, he can bring it to pass.
Yes, sir.
Now, I ain't saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that, it's not going to be a bumpy road. I'm not saying it's not going to be uncomfortable. But if God gave you that vision, then in my opinion, based on the fact that I know God can't lie, as long as I know he gave me that vision, then that vision must come to pass. But I got to hold myself accountable to the planning and preparation and the work that it's going to take to see it come through. Now, what I've learned is my time ain't God's time. And his time ain't my time.
That's right.
So I don't know when that vision is going to come to pass. I just have to trust that it will come to pass. And I believe that it will. So, I believe in my heart that things will, come together, because I know all things work together for good. That those that serve the Lord are called according to his purpose.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's where we get in trouble sometimes is we have great expectations for things that are not necessarily according to his will. They're according to our will. So, we want to, hit the lottery. We want the new house, the new car, the new this, the new that. And what we want is not necessarily in line with God will want us to have, well, at least not in that particular moment. Because it's not that I don't think God doesn't want us to have it. I think he just wants us to have it within the right time frame. He doesn't want us to sacrifice certain necessities. He doesn't want us to, sacrifice the planning and preparation that he knows is going to take, not only to get the things that we want, but to keep them.
That's right.
So I think that's why we talked about it in previous episode. There's we got to till that ground. We got to plant that seed before we actually reap that harvest. So all those things are mixed in there together, and that's where the great expectations should come from. And if I'm knowing that I'm putting in the necessary work and I'm doing the necessary planning and preparation, then I think it's okay to have the expectations, and set them high and dream big. Because, it's crazy that I don't think we dream high enough in our community. I think we need to dream bigger and better. I don't want to just have a company. I want to have the best company. And why can't we have that? We can have it. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some planning. It's going to take some preparation. It's going to take some sacrifice. We need, I believe, to start dreaming bigger. And what this podcast is all about is, of course, helping to close the gap, and when it comes to wealth in our community. And really what that does is it allows our kids to have great expectations. So for me, why do I want success? Why do I want the financial reward and to be in a financially comfortable position? It's not so I can just go buy whatever I want, but it's also so I can put my kids and my family in positions where they can attack their dreams, where they're allowed to have great expectations, and I can support them in whatever dream and aspiration they may have to be able to move forward with those expectations. All too often, I think we're sacrificing our future and even our kids' future in a way because we haven't planned and prepared to allow them to have great expectations. How many times do we know the stories and hear the stories all the time about our athletes in particular, that what is the athlete's goal? The goal is to get mama out the hood. The goal is to put mom and dad in a better situation. The goal is to get them a new house, a new car. Well, when is it going to change and become where the athlete's job and his dream is to put his kids in the better situation? We always having to reach back instead of push forward. We got to get to a place where we're pushing forward instead of having to reach back. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting to do forward.
Correct.
Your parents and your loved ones and the people you came up and the people that you feel like supported you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We want to take care of the people that have taken care of us and be able to give to those that have given us us.
Amen.
But the planning and the preparation that is necessary and the dream that needs to actually unfold is the kid being allowed to have that imagination, allowed to grow and run wild. See, that's what our community is missing, in my opinion, that other communities have. Is why do you see so much innovation, it seems like, come from other communities where they're allowed to dream, they're allowed to grow, they're allowed to take a chance. And if they fail, there's somebody there to pick them up. In our community, if we fall, it's usually not anybody that'll help pick us up. If we fail, it's, see, I told you you should have never took that chance. You shouldn't have made that attempt. When I told, people that I'm going to be a financial advisor, and I said, I'm going to start a Black-owned wealth management firm, and people looking, well, why would you want to do that? Well, you think you're going to actually talk to Black people about money? You think they're going to listen to you? Why would they listen to you? I'm like, well, it's not about them listening to me. It's about me being obedient to what God has shown me. And if he's shown it to me, that means he's going to make a way. He's going to provide enough people and space and opportunities such as this platform for me to use the gift that he gave me to be able to go out and hopefully paint a picture and help people so now their kids can have great expectations.
Yeah. And so what you're saying, it really leans into being a good steward of who God has called you to be and what God has provided for you to provide to others, right? And speaking of that, Wilbur, that really ties into our text of for today, our guiding text for today, Luke chapter 13. I know we used the same text last week, but with the great expectations, it also ties in. We want to follow up with that, is that Luke 13 is where Jesus, the parable of Jesus and the fig tree, where he walks and he's traveling and he sees a fig tree, and this fig tree, he's passed by it multiple times. And the fig tree every time has not had any fruit on it. And this time, as he passes by it, he tells the gardener to go ahead and cut it down because it's not bearing any fruit. But then the gardener says, look, well, wait a minute, let's not cut it down. Let me till around it, let me fertilize it, and then see if it'll bear some fruit. And the gardener says, if it bears fruit then well, it's good. But if it doesn't, after we put that type of work in, then go ahead and cut it down. So just like what you were just saying is that you were called to do the work, and you want to bear the fruit that God has called you to bear. And that's why we're coming on the show today in Great Expectations, is that Jesus had realistic expectations for the fig tree. He did not look for the fig tree to bear some plums. He didn't look for any watermelons growing off of it, right? All Jesus looked for from the fig tree was figs. Why? Because it's a fig tree, right? You do financial advisement. That's your calling. That's your ministry. That's what you are called to be, a steward of your finances, but then also help us in the community, in our community especially, to be good stewards over what God has blessed us to have, right? That if God has blessed us to be fig trees and we're bearing figs, then we need to make sure that the figs that we bear are able to feed the community.
Absolutely.
Right? To be able to take care of the community, or we may be able to make some fig jam with those figs, right?
Some preserves.
Or some preserves, some wine, or whatever the case may be that God has called us to do with our figs, right? And so that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about great expectations, being good stewards, actually having realistic expectations. And that's what it is. Like when Jesus came up on this fig tree, he had a realistic expectation. That was a great expectation, because here's the thing, right? When we talk about great expectations and you doing what you need to do, the fig tree could bear a lot of figs or just a few figs, right? And that goes to what you were saying about we need to dream bigger, right? We need to, not only do you want to just be this small business, but you want to be a large business, right? You don't only want to be able to take care of the people that are just here in around where you live, and but you want to extend the various cities, the various states, right? Because, and that's what I think that ties into what we're talking about when we're talking about doing more, dreaming bigger, is that, hey, we always focus on small businesses. Well, I want everybody to realize that a great expectation is to take your small business to become a large business, right? Take your small business to become a large corporation, right? Doing the same thing that you're already doing.
Absolutely.
Right? Not saying you're getting outside of yourself. The fig tree, all it had to do was bear some figs. And if the fig tree at least bear one fig, it was at least doing its job.
Well, absolutely.
Realistic.
Well, Bible's already told us our gift is going to make room for us. A man skillful in his work is going to be placed before great men. So, how many of us can say we're truly skilled in our chosen profession? How many of us are actually looking to improve ourselves on a daily basis in our chosen profession? See, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to talk to us a little bit, because I feel like in our community, we got too many jack of all trades and masters of none. See, everybody wants to do everything. Everybody wants to, have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but you ain't mastered what's in front of you and what God has told you is the one thing that's going to pay your mortgage, is the one thing that's going to put your kids through school. So, we have fallen into this impression of, we hear these mottos and you got to have 7 streams of income. And there's nothing wrong with having 7 streams of income. But understanding that 7 streams of income can come from one situation, is becoming a master at one thing will create opportunities from that one thing that now generate revenue in 7 different ways. So, but we get so caught up in wanting to take the easy way out. We say, well, you know what? I got my job over here and I don't have to push myself to be the best at my job. And I don't have to be necessarily a professional at my job. I just can be serviceable at my job.
Right.
But then I'm going to do XYZ on the side. I remember back in the, it was, I don't know if people been doing it, were called the Body by V. People were selling the shakes and the wraps and all these different things on the side. And I'm like, well, and I knew people that were teaching education and teaching education. Don't get mad at me. I'm just using you for example in this situation. We love you. We need you to continue to educate our children. But I'm just gonna pick on them for a little bit because I saw a lot of those people that were you got your 8 to 3 or whatever you're teaching, but then you're getting off and you're taking time and you're selling whatever you're selling. And I would look at them. I'm like, well, you're taking a lot of time and you're investing a lot of money into doing something that may produce revenue. And I was thinking about it. And I was like, well, and I asked a friend of mine, I said, well, you're taking time to sell this and you got to buy the products. You got to learn how to sell it. You got to learn what you're selling. You got to, you got to get people to buy into it. I said, well, couldn't you take that same time and get a master's that could produce guaranteed revenue and a guaranteed pay raise? Couldn't you take that same energy and get your EDS and get your doctorate that's going to produce even greater revenue? Couldn't you seek to just improve yourself professionally in a way where you're still spending money anyway, but it's going to provide guaranteed results? And guess what? You can usually make enough money in your profession where you don't have to do anything else. But because we're not at the peak of any of these professions, we are always looking to go find another way to generate revenue. If you are the best in whatever your chosen area is, you ain't got to do nothing else. See, and it's funny because I look at other communities, and whether it's the Asian community, whether it's the Caucasian community, whatever community you want to look at, that have been highly successful and financially, put themselves in a great position. How many of those communities and those individuals are jacks of all trades and masters of none? How many Caucasians you see that are physicians or dentists or doctors that are doing something else on the side? If they're doing something else on the side, they've made so much money in that one area, they just happen to fall into real estate and need to do real estate on the side because they got to do something with the money. They're not in a situation where we're trying to create another stream of income because this one is not sustainable or not substantive enough. We're always doing because we're like, well, we're not making enough money here because we're not being good stewards of what we got, number one. But then we're always chasing unrealistic expectations because we come and we're easily sold by the stories of, the person that's at the top of the pyramid and how they came and they brought in 15 other people and they were able to, grow to a point where now they're making all this money, in this pyramid scheme, and you can do the same thing and build up your team and bring in your people and get your, so now we have a bunch of people that have day jobs that need to be becoming better at their day job and becoming professionals and specialists and experts in their day job. They're not doing that and are spending time on their side hustle. And then they're wondering why they're not getting a promotion on the day job. Well, when are you getting better and putting yourself in a better position to be better qualified at your day job? Now, you can't get mad if you're getting passed over for the promotion if you haven't done anything to promote yourself, if you haven't taken the necessary step and sacrifice to educate yourself, if you haven't poured into and invested in yourself into an area where it's going to provide and produce guaranteed return on investment. See, these are the things that, we don't like to talk about. We want to kind of, we dance around the line and we want to, we want to coddle people and we want them to feel good. And we want to talk about things that are comfortable. But guess what? Close the wealth gap is going to be uncomfortable. Being disciplined and sacrificing is going to be uncomfortable. Making sure that you're financially successful and a good steward, it is uncomfortable because all of us want to spend and splurge and enjoy ourselves from time to time. But guess what? That's when you have to have some restraint and some discipline and stick to the script if you have one. But how many of us actually have a script?
Have that script, have that plan laid out to do what is necessary to do. So what you're saying, Wilbert, is, as we talk about great expectations, is Wilbert just told you all, beware of following the trend. some of those things that he talked about people tried to make money in was because it was trendy. So instead of focusing on the trend, focus on doing what you are supposed to do and who you are and find a way to be great at that, right? Because oftentimes we want to live the soft life. We want to find luxury and we want to avoid the real work, the real grind. So when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to dive back into some of those trends that get us offset so that we can continue to have great expectations. See you back after this commercial. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and the owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And this title of this week's show is Great Expectations, where we're trying to get you to avoid the trends and the triggers that cause you to be misaligned with your financial goals so that you can really anchor yourself in the truth of God's wisdom in the midst of a distracted world. So you just eloquently gave the people a layout. Like you said, we're not coddling anybody. That's why we come here. That's why the name of this show is Closing the Gap, and subtitled The Truth About Black Wealth is because we don't try to coddle anybody, because the truth hurts sometimes.
Absolutely.
Right? And the truth is not about, making you comfortable. The truth is about making you uncomfortable so that you can do what you need to do to be comfortable.
Absolutely.
And too many times we want to be coddled, we want to be comfortable, we want to do the easy things in life, and we want to follow the trends. And that's where we left off from the last segment, was talking about the trends. And you talked about, Wilbert, how people can be working a job and then based on the trends of what is selling and what type of pyramid, type of platform, how it looks like you can try to make some money, people will get off track by going and trying to get into those things. But what we're striving to do with today's show is that, hey, if you have laid out your plan like we've been talking about all this year, and then you already have laid out great expectations. If you are anchoring yourself in being who God has called you to be and doing what God has called you to do, and like the fig tree was supposed to be doing and bearing figs, but the fig tree was just present. If you do what you were supposed to do and bear fruit, guess what? You are going to provide value not only for yourself, but also for the public, also for the people, also for your community. And that's what we're striving to do here, is we're striving to bring value to our community. And we want you, if you have not done so yet, to set up an appointment with Mr. Wilbert Hamilton at Hamilton Wealth Advisors to review and set a plan for your life, set a plan for your finances. And I guarantee you that Mr. Hamilton will help you come up with some great expectations for your finances. No matter how much money you make, it does not matter what class you are in this world, whether you are in the lower class, the middle class, or higher class, you know what I'm saying, or you're in the 1%. Mr. Hamilton can put a plan together specifically for you to help you achieve the goals and the vision and the mission that you have for your life, and also help you get to the point where you understand what it is that God will have you to do. So, Wilbur, as you were talking about those things, right, the following the trends, I think sometimes people get caught up in financial myths. Yeah, I think that's kind of ties into what you were talking about how you can be working a job, and instead of anchoring yourself down in that particular field of study or field of work or expertise that you are in and becoming an expert there, or even if you're not an expert, at least exploring all the options that are in that field, right? Because, and I say that even though we do want everybody to be great, but there's levels to greatness.
Absolutely.
Right? You don't have to be the best at something to still be one of the most successful
Correct.
in a various field, right? You just need to understand your niche. right? Dollar General sells a lot, and it is in a lot of locations. Most times, people will look down on dollar stores and Dollar General and think that Walmart and Target are necessarily better, right? But here's the thing: both companies are successful, right? Well, all companies, Walmart, Target, Dollar General, Dollar Tree, all of them are successful, right? Because they found that niche of where they're going to service the people. And that's all we're trying to get you to do is understand that when Jesus came up on the fig tree, Jesus was not asking the fig tree to do anything outside of what the fig tree was already made to do. Produce figs, right? And however many you can produce them. But what happens is we fall into the trap of myths, and many of us do that with our finances. We try to follow financial myths. So if you will, like you said, you're not going to coddle anybody on this show today or at any time. So help us out, Mayor Wilbert, and dispelling some of the financial myths and give us some of the financial truths that we need to follow if we're going to be able to achieve great expectations in our financial planning.
It's funny. It's, we always talk about, creating generational wealth and how do we close the wealth gap. And that word that always comes up is always truth. It's always trust. Is, do we trust each other? Do you trust yourself? And that's where really all this starts at. Financial success starts with you trusting yourself. And, the older I get, the more and more important I learn how trust is in relationships, marriage, and, with your kids and your workplace. Trust is one of the most valuable things that you can have. And I understand that I'm so grateful now. And it's, ties back into our Father's Day edition of the greatest gift I tell people my father ever gave me was the truth. He told me the uncomfortable truth at all times. He always gave me the truth about myself and where I was and what I was or was not doing in order to have great expectations. See, we all have great expectations as a kid, and of course, as a kid and as, athlete, I wanted to go and play Division I, basketball and football and those things growing up. And my father would tell me, man, you're not working hard enough to be a Division I athlete. That Division I scholarship that you're looking for ain't gonna come knocking because you're not doing what it takes to be a Division I athlete. And those were uncomfortable truths that he gave me. He gave it to me straight, raw, no chaser, as they say. But it was the truth. I might not have liked it. It might have been uncomfortable, but one thing you cannot argue and one thing that does not ever change is the truth. And the truth will set you free. And as I got older, I started to embrace the truth. And I let the truth be motivation to me and inspiration to me. And guess what? Those great expectations that I had for myself, all of a sudden came true because I embraced the truth and I embraced the work and I embraced the expectations and what it was going to take in order to achieve what I actually expected of myself. So that's why I know, that we need the truth. Too many kids don't get the truth. Too many adults don't get the truth. We have to start doing a better job as a community of telling the truth to the people we say we love and care about. Don't let your brother or sister walk around complaining about what the employer is not doing for them if you know they're not doing for themselves to be a better employee of that employer. So we can't expect the raise or the promotion if we're not being and showing ourselves worthy of that raise and that promotion. Now, we all know in our community we have glass ceilings and we know there's, racial inequities and there's a lot of things that we deal with, from a community standpoint. We get a lot of pushback in a lot of different ways, and I'm well aware of that. But at the same time, we can't use it as an excuse and a crutch. I still got to put in the work. And if you trust God and you know that he can do all things and you know that he can move mountains and you got the faith of a mustard seed, put in the work take the criticism, use it constructively, and allow that turn into great expectations that so now we can pass that on because that's what our kids are seeing. They're seeing us give or not give our all or our best to whatever profession that we're involved in. And if you're not giving your best to your profession that is there to take care of them, how can you expect your child to give you the best as something they don't even understand is going to affect them later on? So our kids don't understand from a day-to-day basis, obviously, how their work or lack thereof is going to affect their future. We understand that, and we're trying to build the good habits, and we're trying to build the strong character, and for when life gets tough, that tough get going. See, we're in our minds, we're always preparing them for that, but the greatest gift you can give them is the gift of being an example. Is walking like you talk it. They always hear the saying of, you can't be a man till you see a man. So I have to make sure that I'm being accountable to my profession, accountable to my family, accountable to my children, to make sure that I'm not just speaking about it, I'm actually being about it. That I'm actually setting great expectations, but then I'm putting in the work necessary and making the sacrifices to be who I say I want to be. And me knowing that allows me to stay disciplined, allows me to stay focused. And when you're so focused on becoming the best that you can be at whatever your profession or whatever your calling or whatever your gift is, you automatically avoid the myths that we need to bust from a financial standpoint. Because see, I ain't got time to find out what the trend is going on social media because I'm too busy working. I ain't got time to get caught up in the pyramid scheme because guess what? I'm too busy working. I'm studying. I'm planning. I'm preparing. I'm doing the things necessary to better myself. And see, there's no secret as to why they say the most successful and the wealthiest people in the world watch the least amount of TV. They're on social media the least amount of time. See, I have social media pages, but 95% of the time, I don't even see my social media pages that I have. There are other people that are actually taking care of those social media pages for me on my behalf, but that's because I'm working. I'm meeting with clients. I'm studying. I'm traveling. I'm doing all the things necessary to put myself in position to allow myself and my kids to be able to dream and have great expectations. So we have to get away from those myths, but in order to get away with the myths, you got to have something that you're looking towards. So we get caught up in those pyramid schemes. We get caught up in those, those susus and, those different things that come about from time to time because we're trying to find a way to get rich quick. We're trying to find a way to turn water into wine. And that's not it. We know how to make wine, but you got to grow some grapes first, which means you got to plant some seeds. You got to till the ground. You got to water it, and you have to grow. Then you have to harvest those grapes, and then you got to crush those grapes. And it goes through a process in order of fermenting to turn into wine. So you didn't just wake up and the grape was there and it turned automatically into wine. There were some steps that had to be followed. We don't want to go through all those steps to be successful. And if you have a plan, like we've talked about from the beginning of the year, writing it down and making a plan. If you don't have a written plan, then guess what? You don't have a plan. If you haven't sat down with a professional like myself or some other professional financially, and you've actually created a written investment plan where you know how much you're saving, where you know how much you're investing, you know what you're investing in, you know how long you need to do it, you know the goals and aspirations and what the possibilities are going to be out of this particular investment opportunity that you're participating in, then guess what? You don't have a plan. You have a hope. You have a dream. You have a wish. Well, we don't want to bake on a hope, a dream, and a wish. We want to create a plan because guess what? The Lord has told me if you write it down and make it plain, then I'll make it come true. But if you ain't wrote it down and made it plain, then guess what? It may or may not happen.
So what you're saying that with truth, back to the text, right? Back to the text of Luke 13. So the truth of the matter was the fig tree was not bearing fruit, right? Jesus didn't coddle the gardener, even though that was his fig tree, right? He told him the truth. And then, with you just saying that, what happened with the gardener there was the gardener came up with a plan that said, hey, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This fig tree isn't bearing any fruit. So let me revise a plan to try to make the fig tree bear some fruit. So he put the work in. He said, hey, you know, I'm not going to just wish, not going to just hope. I'm not just going to have faith alone, because the scripture also said that faith without works is dead.
Absolutely.
So he went and he put the work in. Now, the text doesn't tell us whether the fig tree ever bore any fruit, you know, in Luke chapter 13, but he had a plan.
Absolutely.
And they were honest with each other, and they were able to work that plan out, right? And so that's the same thing I hear you saying, is that don't get caught up in the myths, don't get caught up in the trends, don't get caught up in what's going on, and be willing to put the work in, right? Put the plan together, be willing to follow the plan, and realize that you can believe that something is going to happen as much as you want to. You can have the greatest of expectations, but if you're not willing to work toward bringing those expectations to fruition, guess what? It's not going to happen.
Well,
And that's the honest truth.
and you know what I tell people all the time, I slip, baby, you got to pay to play. You know, you don't just wake up and success knocks on your door. You got to get up every day and you have to pay the price to be successful. You have to pay the price of long days, late nights, you know, constant studying, constant evaluation, constant going back to the drawing board, constant disappointment, and constant growth. All those things happen simultaneously. Even when we don't realize it, is as bad as it feels sometimes when you're going to the gym, you're trying to get yourself together, and you have those strains and those aches and those pains. All of that's happening because that muscle's being torn down because it needs room to grow. It needs room to strengthen itself. It's got to shed some of that dead weight in order so it can regenerate into a new and stronger muscle. See, but it's not comfortable. It don't feel good along the way. But these are things that are necessary. And that's why we can't get caught up in, you know, the social media culture and the get rich quick schemes and anything that looks too good to be true. It usually is. And we suffer from that a lot because we've had a lot of disappointment in our community. That's been some our fault, and a lot of it hasn't been our fault. We've been greatly taken advantage of by a lot of financial institutions in different ways. So with a lack of education, with a lack of expertise, with a lack of experience involving certain financial opportunities, what is created is a lack of trust. And when you don't trust information, when you don't trust opportunities, you tend to lean into things and opportunities that just sound good to you. And you tend to be overly optimistic. If you're more educated, if you're more involved, if you're more so when you have a plan, you're more likely to stick to that plan. It's the reason why the studies show that when you have a financial plan and a financial advisor, you do on average 3% better on average per year than someone who does not have one. Now, that's a big difference. That's the difference between somebody, if you invest in $1,000, that's the difference between you making $0 and $3. At the end of the day, give me my $3. Well, I'm sorry, $30.
Yeah.
$30.
Right.
You know, I want my $30. And then that compounds year over year over year over a lifetime. That's thousands of dollars that you will miss just because you want to be a jack of all trades and master of none. So we have to get out of that mindset, and we have to start going and trusting professionals. And I'm not saying every financial professional is great at their job, but more than likely, they're more educated and informed than you are. They have access to more information than you have, because if you've done your due diligence on whoever it is you're sitting across, you should know exactly what education, what licenses, what certifications this individual have, what experience they have, what type of clients they work with. And these are questions you should ask them. And if they tell you, well, I'm fresh out of school, I've never worked with someone before, well, you should ask them, do you have a supervisor? I'm not saying I'm not going to work with you, but I'm just saying I would like for you to get a supervisor, someone who can assist you in this process to make sure that I don't get shortchanged. Or guess what? You're within your right to say, you know what? thank you, but no thank you. I think I'm going a different direction. That is your right and your choice. As a free human being, as a free thinking individual, you've been given free will and the right to educate yourself and do your own evaluation. The problem is we haven't done the education necessary to be able to do a proper evaluation, yet and still we've made financial decisions with no information, and there's nowhere in the world we can have great expectations with no knowledge. Be right back after this break.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I'm your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you're tuned in once again to another show. And this show is entitled Great Expectations, where we're trying to get you away from the trends, beware of the triggers that will cause you to be misaligned from your financial goals so that you can follow the truth of God's wisdom to achieve the great expectation that you have for your life. So we've been talking today about, we've gotten into those things about the trends. We've gotten into things about the expectations. We talked about the fact of why you need to beware of myths and follow the truth. And in truth, we're saying, hey, being honest with yourself, being honest about your situation, and then also being able to find somebody that's going to be honest with you. And that is finding a good fiduciary financial advisor, somebody that is willing to put in the work, somebody that's willing to help you achieve the goals and the plans that you have, right? And to figure out, who is it that God desires you to be and how can you fully maximize your potential personally, but also financially.
Absolutely.
Right. That's what we want. That's what we're striving to do. We want you to have expectation. We want you to have great expectation, but we don't want you to make unrealistic expectations. And too many times we make unrealistic expectations and we want a pie to fall out of the sky because we don't want to go and buy the necessary ingredients and put in the work and be in the kitchen while the oven is burning, right, to wait on something to cook. We don't have that type of patience. And so what we want you to realize is great expectations, you have to also have great patience. To necessary to be able to achieve your goals, and oftentimes, what you talk about, in investing, there's this, time horizon and, that you can't achieve anything quickly, as you said. People will go into these get rich quick schemes, right? And people that trick you into doing those things, they're not being honest with you, right? We just talked about being truthful, be careful of following the myths, right? Because anytime that somebody lies to you to try to make money for themselves, they don't care anything about you. And that's why you need to set up a consultation with Hamilton Wealth Advisor, see Mr. Wilbert Hamilton, and he's going to be honest with you. Why? How do I know that? Well, because he's honest with me and been honest with me even before we started doing this show, and I brought my investments to him. And then also, he does not charge for consultations, right? He's giving you the information for free. So take the time, set up an appointment, get an advisement, take the time to get a plan laid out for you with Hamilton Wealth Advisors so that you can achieve great expectations. So we want to talk about it now. I want to shift a little bit, right? We want to, also still deal with the truth of God's word because that's what's guiding us in this text, Luke 13 and the fig tree and Jesus. But then also, we get triggered in life sometime, right? We get triggered to have unrealistic expectations and unrealistic financial goals. And sometimes we can have a plan and we can have sat down and talked to a fiduciary planner like yourself, but then we see what's going on in the news and we see the wars, we see the bombings, and we see all of these things. And oftentimes these triggers cause us to lose sight of what we already have set forth in our plan. So if you will, I'll come back and do spiritual side, but I want you to do some of the financial side of how can we hold ourselves to our plan and not get triggered by what's going on in the media and what's going on surrounding our communities.
Yeah, and it's crazy when we talk about that because there's obviously been a lot going on this year overall. We started off with the tariffs were the talk of the town.
Yeah.
And, of course, then it went to, interest rates, of course. And, interest rates have popped back up again as far as what's going to happen with interest rates and, how quickly the Fed has lowered them or not lowered them. And all of a sudden, obviously, the wars and rumors of wars, and now we legitimately have a war on our hands. And, there's been a number of things that's happened. And, what I tell people all the time is you can't be reactive. You have to be proactive. And when you have a plan, and everybody's plan can be completely different, and their action during those times of worldly action can be different for every person based on your goals and objectives. But when you have a plan for yourself, we know how to adjust based on what's going on in the world, or if we need to adjust at all. If you have a plan, and our goal is long-term financial planning, and you have a 20-year outlook, and me being 43 years of age, and being in a situation where I want to be financially free by the time I'm 45 is my personal goal, to be financially free at 45, being able to literally walk away at 55, and I don't want to work to 65. Well, I laid out my plan back when I was 35. I didn't wait till I got 43 to put together my plan. I started putting my plan in action actually before 35. Really was closer to around 30 is when I started putting together my plan. So when these things happen, and there's going to be market corrections that happen all the time, there's always, like we said, a trigger to something. But there's a natural evolution in the market where there's peaks and valleys all the time. What goes up must come down, and it will go back up again. So we have to have natural corrections in our market, because there are times when we go through the market is overvalued, and there's times when we go through the market is undervalued. Those are the peaks and valleys that we go through. There's highs and lows. We have the highest of highs, and then we have the lowest of lows. These things that's the natural cycle of the market. Now, if we know the market has a natural cycle that we're going to go through these peaks and valleys, well, obviously I can't be revamping my plan every other week, every other month, every other quarter, every other year. I have to be able to put a plan together that's going to be able to stand the test of time and withstand the peaks and the valleys in the market. So having that plan, it eliminates the worry of having to wonder, how is this going to affect me? Well, guess what? We do the evaluation up front, so we know how this is going to affect you, and we plan for that. So it may mean that, guess what? We need to save a little bit more because we know there's going to be peaks and valleys. If your time horizon is shorter, if your time horizon is longer, that means we have time to recover. As quickly as the market took a dip and a turn in April, it regenerated and came back up just as fast. So if you were invested in January and you went through the bad week that we had in April, where the market reached correction level of a 20% drop, since then, and we're in basically the middle or towards the end of June now, the market has totally recovered from that in just that 2-month time frame. So if I'm going to be reactionary to everything that's going on in the market, then I'm going to miss out on the recovery if I've lost. So this is what happens. We're all too many people, they jump in and jump out trying to time, taking bad advice. The water cooler talk, so to speak, is what I call it. You're listening to your coworker, your neighbor, who are not licensed financial advisors. They don't know what you invested in, how you invested. They don't know, what your actual retirement time frame is. They don't know what kind of retirement income you need. Well, guess what? Do you even need income from this to maintain your retirement? There's a lot of people that live well within their means. And by the time they retire, their mortgage is paid off, cars are paid off, they have very little to no debt. And guess what? They're making $2,500 to $3,000 a month in Social Security. And guess what? They can sustain themselves just on their Social Security.
Yeah.
And then they have a pension. And then they have a 401k they've saved. So in that situation, do they need to worry about what's going on in the market? We're invested and we're staying the course based on what is in the best interest of us. What is my risk profile? What am I comfortable with in from an investment standpoint? What am I willing to risk? Because guess what? We've evaluated, and we talked about before, retirement and investment. Retirement is what I need to maintain my standard of living for the rest of my life. Investment is what I got left over after I've secured my retirement. But if we haven't sat down and created that plan, if we haven't done our due diligence and we haven't had an evaluation done, we don't know if or when we can ever retire, let alone put ourselves in position to be more optimistic with our investments. So there's always, a method to the madness, so to speak. The problem is we haven't sat down and learned the method. See, we're making decisions without the right education and definitely without the right access. Because see, this world is not just what you know, it's also who you know. And all people are not created equally. And what some people have access to is greater than what others have access to. And if you haven't met with a financial advisor such as myself, you have no idea what I have access to. All you know is what you know. Well, how do you know that what I can do if you have no idea what I have access to? You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. And that is the difference. And that's where the wealth gap continues to grow in our community, because we're making decisions about our financial future without having all of the information, without knowing all of the resources that are available. So unfortunately, there are on far too many occasions that I meet with people that tell me, well, I invested in this, I've done that, where I've locked my money up here, where I took it out and I just put it under the mattress and did that. And I'm asking them why. Why did you make this decision? Did you understand the tax ramifications of that? Did you understand the long-term financial planning aspect of that? Do you understand, the fact that you don't have long-term care protection now and people are living longer? And guess what? The state will take your stuff if you don't have the necessary protections in place. Do you understand? I just made the decision. I didn't want to do that. Well, that's not a valid excuse. Ignorance is no longer an excuse as to why we're not successful financially, because there's more than enough information available. There's more than enough people. I know other advisors that are willing to provide you with information and resources to be successful. I'm not going to tell you who to see. I'm not going to tell you what color the person needs to be that you see. I am going to say that you see somebody. I am going to say that you do an evaluation and put yourself in position to be successful. There's no successful person that's ever walked the face of this earth that didn't have a coach, that didn't have somebody that was pouring into them at some particular point in time, that educated them, that pointed them, that guided them in some direction. If you don't have a living person, you better have God directing that ship. And guess what? One thing I know about God is he's going to put the people in your life and around you to help give you the advice you need to be successful. But guess what? We got to be willing to accept the advice. But more importantly, we got to be willing to go to Christ and ask for help.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Because that's where our expectations should be, right? The song says, build your hope on things eternal, right? You know what I'm saying? And so we need to always be looking to God, because God is the author and the finisher of our faith. What does that mean? Well, first of all, you need to believe. That's what faith is. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the great expectation. So what are you expecting? What is your hope? As you stated, Wilbert, your expectation is to retire in a few more years because you set that plan in place when you were around 35 or so years old, right? That's the same thing that we have to do now, is lay out a plan and then submit that plan to God and ask God to continue to lead and guide us in the plan. Too many times when we lay out the plan, we want to rush it, right? We have an issue with having patience, right? We have an issue with waiting. We want to take matters into our own hands, and we are tempted to fix the situation. And so when we see the various triggers on the news, and although we have sat down with a fiduciary financial planner advisor like yourself, and you've given us a plan and you've told us this is how it needs to go, and then even when we see what goes on in the news, and we give you a call, you're gonna calm us down and say, "Hey, look, we knew this was gonna happen. We didn't know exactly what was gonna happen, but we've already planned for this. We are ready to make whatever adjustment needs to be made if things start going a certain way. We have certain things set in place that will give us notifications of how we need to shift the finances around. So we had a plan already laid out. As you stated, that's why we need to have somebody like yourself to be able to go to that will give us that calming, to center us back on the main plan. And that's also what happens in the scriptures as well. Whenever we get triggered by what's going on in the world, we need to be able to go back to the word of God. Because as you stated earlier about the wars and the rumors of wars, but that scripture in Matthew chapter 24 says that, basically tells us, don't get so concerned about the wars and the rumors of wars, because the end is not yet come. And that's what we need to remember for our faith in God and for our personal lives, but also with our financial lives, is that, hey, when you hear these various triggers going on, the end has not come because we're still alive. So as you said, you're going to have peaks and valleys. You're going to get corrections, right? And the same thing happens with us, that we need to always trust God's time. And you stated earlier that God's timing is not our time, and our time is not God's time, right? So we need to pay attention to that and be careful and just continue to walk, right? Allow ourselves to grow. Allow God to guide us in the midst of situations, right? Because oftentimes what happens is our eyes get long, right? My mother used to tell me, you know, I got a plate full of food.
My eyes got bigger than
My eyes get bigger than your stomach. I want some of that.
Yep.
And you need to finish what's on your plate, right? You already got food already with you. Take care of what you have now, and then you'll be able to get some more. And oftentimes our plan that you've already given us, and God has already given us a plan financially. God has given us a plan for our lives and our faith, and neither one of them has fully gone through yet, right? We're just at halftime in our plan, and now we feel like it's the end of the game. We want to rush things. And so what I want our listeners to do is just take the time to be patient with yourself. Continue to have the expectation. We want you to have the high expectations because we believe that God will prosper you, but don't rush it. Don't allow what's going on in the news cycle to cause you to get off track with what God has for you, right? I had some friends that came through the shop and they were talking about some issues they were having. I said, man, listen, all you need to do is tell God about it, right? You trying to fix the situation yourself. All you need to do is talk to God about the situation, and God is the one that will change the heart of humankind, right? When the Israelites were in bondage and Moses kept going to Pharaoh saying, let my people go. Every time Moses went to Pharaoh, in the scripture, it tells us that God said, hey, Moses, I want you to go, but I'm going to harden his heart each time you go. And it wasn't until the last time that he went, after going multiple times, that God said, okay, I'm going to change his heart this time, and he's going to let you go, right? I believe that what God was doing was showing Moses that, hey, you got to trust me. You got to trust my plan. Don't feel that you can ever make anything happen on your own, but know that you got to follow my plan and do what I want you to do. And then I will make the change when it's time, when you are ready, when you are ready, when the people are ready to move, then I'll change Pharaoh's heart and allow you to go. And so we need to have that same mindset to constantly submit ourselves, humble ourselves to God, because we have great expectations the same way Moses and the Israelites had great expectations to get out of bondage, right? That's the same thing that we have for our own finances. We want to get out of bondage, right? We want to get out of the hood, so to speak. We want to get out of being called the last and the low class as a race of people, right? We want to be in the top seat. We want to be in the king seat. We want to be able to have and stop being the have-nots. And that's why we have the great expectations. But what we need to realize is that, look, don't follow the trends that the world is doing. Don't be triggered by what is going on in the news cycle, but just continue to anchor yourself in the truth of God's word. And if you anchor yourself in the truth of God's word, you can achieve every great expectation that you have. Why? Because God has great expectations for you. And we here at Closing the Gap, the Truth About Black Wealth podcast, we also have great expectations for you as well.